In the underworld, they whispered his name like a prayer for mercy. Amin Kazemi, the king of Chicago, a man who could snuff out a life as easily as a candle flame. But on this particular evening at the Gilded Cage, Amin wasn't looking for a victim. He was looking for a distraction. His gaze fell upon the shivering waitress standing over him, the woman who had just emptied a bottle of champagne onto his $5,000 tailored suit. Rather than erupting in fury, he let out a low, bone-chilling laugh that caused the entire room to go still. Motioning toward the empty stage meant for a world-class soprano, he leaned in. "You've disrupted my evening," he murmured, his tone a dangerous mix of silk and steel. "Now you will provide the remedy." Before we dive deeper into this story, click the subscribe button and tell us where you are watching from in the comment section. If this story moves you, share it with someone who loves a good tale. Remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story. His lips curled into a predatory smirk. "Perform the Queen of the Night aria perfectly, and I'll make you my wife. Fail, and you'll spend the next decade paying off this suit in my private club." He was certain he had cornered her, but he was oblivious to the secret she carried. Outside, the Chicago rain lashed against the Gold Coast's most exclusive sanctuary. To the elite, the Gilded Cage was a haven of luxury. To the initiated, it was a neutral zone where the city's most ruthless syndicates met to negotiate. Angela Martinez smoothed her uniform, trying to still her shaking hands. After 8 months of working in this den of lions, the fear remained a constant companion. At 24, her life was a blur of exhaustion, split between scrubbing plates in Pilsen and acting as a nameless shadow in this club, an invisible girl who was never supposed to be noticed. But tonight the shadows were gone. Every eye in the room, including those of the man with the granite jaw and eyes like black ice, was fixed on her. Amin Kazemi commanded the room with a terrifying silence, unaware that the ghost he was trying to humiliate was about to change everything. On her first day, Angela received a chilling warning. When Amin Kazemi enters the room, you become invisible. No eye contact, no mistakes, no breathing too loud. But in the high-stakes silence of the Gilded Cage, the unthinkable happened. A vintage champagne bottle slipped, drenching Amin's $5,000 Italian wool suit in golden liquid. The room went dead. Every conversation froze as 30 pairs of eyes watched the waitress who had seemingly signed her own death warrant. As Angela stammered an apology, Amin silenced her with a single hand. He rose slowly, a 6'3" predator, and let out a terrifying, cold laugh. "I was bored tonight," he purred, his voice like velvet over steel. Pointing to the empty stage meant for a world-renowned soprano who had cancelled, he issued a lethal ultimatum. "Take her place. Sing the Queen of the Night aria, the most difficult piece in opera, perfectly. If you succeed, I'll marry you and give you my empire. If you fail, you'll serve 10 years in my private club to pay your debt." The room inhaled. Everyone knew the reputation of Amin's clubs. They were places where women were broken. Angela felt the world tilt. She hadn't sung since the drunk driving death of her father, the legendary Lorenzo Martinez, left her in a cycle of poverty and debt. "1 minute," Amin challenged. As the seconds ticked away, her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Don't let them silence you." Remembering the suspicious recordings she'd found regarding his death, Angela realized this wasn't just a wager, it was a chance. While Amin expected her to beg, Angela straightened her spine. She met his icy gaze for the first time. "I'll do it," she declared. Surprise flickered in Amin's eyes. "Then let's see what you're made of, little waitress." Angela Martinez walked toward the stage on legs that felt less like bone and muscle and more like fluid. The platform at the Gilded Cage was small, an intimate space carved out for jazz quartets and melancholic pianists, never intended for the thunderous weight of a Mozart aria. There was no orchestra to hide behind, no velvet curtain to offer sanctuary, only a cold silver microphone and the collective, predatory breath of Chicago's most dangerous men. As she stepped into the spotlight, the glare hit her with the force of a physical blow. The world beyond the stage vanished into a white haze. She couldn't see the faces of the syndicate leaders or the cold, expectant eyes of Amin Kazemi. Perhaps that was a mercy. In the void of the spotlight, she wasn't a waitress with champagne-soaked sleeves. She was a vessel. She closed her eyes, reaching back through years of poverty and grief to the lessons her father had etched into her soul. She found the breath first, deep, diaphragmatic, a slow expansion that filled her lungs to their absolute capacity. Next came the placement, that precise, resonant chamber in the skull where sound transforms into power. Finally, she summoned the emotion. She didn't reach for fear. She reached for the fury of the Queen of the Night, a mother demanding blood, a woman who had lost everything and found her only remaining power in a scream. When she finally opened her mouth, the note that emerged was not the plea of a servant. It was a declaration of war. The coloratura poured from her throat like liquid lightning, impossibly high and terrifyingly precise. When she hit the first high F, the frequency was so pure that the champagne glasses on the surrounding tables began to hum and vibrate in sympathy. The complex runs and jagged staccato trills, the very passages that made world-class sopranos tremble, flowed from her as naturally as a heartbeat. She sang in the German her father had forced her to master until every consonant was a blade. Der Holly rake cocked in meinem Herzen. Hell's vengeance boils in my heart. And as the music soared, it did. 6 years of invisibility, of scrubbing grime from the floors of diners, of enduring the wandering hands of men who thought her dignity was included in the price of a drink. All of it was distilled into the music. The room, previously filled with the clinking of ice and the murmur of illicit deals, had gone from silent to paralyzed. Angela kept her eyes shut, but she felt the atmospheric shift. She felt the exact moment the room stopped seeing a clumsy waitress and started seeing a goddess. She pushed higher, into the stratospheric notes that resided at the absolute boundary of human vocal capability. Her voice didn't waver, it didn't crack. It soared toward the crystal chandelier, making the glass prisms chime softly against one another. When she struck the final impossible high F and held it with a resonance that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building, several men instinctively stood up, drawn to their feet by the sheer magnetism of the sound. Then, as the last note faded into the Chicago night, a vacuum of silence returned. Angela opened her eyes. The room was transformed. The bored expressions had vanished, replaced by an intensity that bordered on reverence. And at the center of it all sat Amin Kazemi. He wasn't just surprised, there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, as if he had finally solved a puzzle he didn't know he was working on. A single person began to clap. Then another joined. Suddenly the room erupted, not with the polite applause of a theater, but with a roar of shock. Angela stood there, her chest heaving, the champagne stain on her uniform a stark reminder of her reality, as Amin rose from his seat. He moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a panther. When he reached the edge of the stage, he didn't bark in order. He extended a hand to help her down. "Who?" he asked, his voice a low velvet rasp that cut through the fading applause. "Are you really?" Before she could speak, a heavy-set man with white hair stood from a back table, his Russian accent thick with disbelief. "Lorenzo Martinez?" he breathed. "You are the daughter of Lorenzo." The room went cold. The applause died instantly. Angela felt her stomach drop. She had guarded her father's legacy like a buried treasure, knowing exactly what that name meant to the men in this room. Her mother had changed their names years ago to hide them, but the bloodline was written in her vocal cords. Amin's eyes narrowed into sharp slits. Lorenzo Martinez. The legendary tenor. "He was my father," Angela said, chin lifted in a final spark of defiance. "He died 6 years ago." "No," Amin corrected softly, his hand still holding hers. "He was murdered 6 years ago." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. "What?" Amin's face hardened, the mask of the bored playboy falling away to reveal the predator beneath. "We need to talk. Privately." He turned to the room, his voice booming with absolute authority. "The evening is over. Leave." It wasn't an invitation. Within minutes, the club was empty, save for Amin's personal security. When the doors were bolted, he turned to her. "Your father didn't die in a drunk driving accident, Angela. He was sober. And he was 48 hours away from testifying against Victor Sterling." The name felt like a physical blow. Victor Sterling, the city's golden boy, the philanthropist who had stood at her father's funeral and wept. "That's a lie," Angela whispered. "Sterling was his patron. His friend." "He is a monster," Amin said bluntly. "He deals in human lives. Your father found the evidence and Sterling silenced him. I've spent 3 years trying to dismantle Sterling's empire because he did the same to my sister. Your father was the key witness I lost." Angela's knees buckled. Amin caught her, his grip surprisingly firm as he guided her into a chair. As he explained the truth, how her mother's illness had been exacerbated by poverty while her father's killer thrived, Angela felt a new kind of fire ignite. "Why tell me this now?" she demanded. Amin leaned in, a dark, calculating smile touching his lips. "Because you just became the most dangerous woman in Chicago. And I have a proposition that will give us both exactly what we want." The air in Amin's private office was thick with the scent of expensive bourbon and old secrets. Angela sat across from him, still in her stained uniform, but the power dynamic had shifted. She was no longer a ghost, she was a collaborator. He slid a glass of scotch across the mahogany desk. "Drink. You're shivering." The alcohol burned, steadying her nerves. "My father," Angela began, her voice gaining strength, "he left recordings. I have a storage unit full of his rehearsals. I think I have the proof you're looking for." Amin's posture sharpened. "If you have his voice on tape discussing Sterling's shipments, we have the leverage to break him. Sterling moves his cargo through the Lake Michigan ports every 6 weeks. Your father must have seen something during one of those high society performances. The Centennial Gala," Angela realized. "He performed for the Sterling Foundation 2 weeks before the accident. He came home that night looking like he'd seen a ghost." "He'd seen the devil," Amin said quietly. "And he died trying to protect you from seeing it too." The revelation of her father's bravery and the cruelty of his death crystallized Angela's resolve. She looked at Amin, the man they called the King of Chicago, and saw a reflection of her own grief. "You said you had a proposition." "Sterling is a man of ritual," Amin explained. "He only trusts his inner circle. I can't get near him, he knows I'm his enemy. But he doesn't know you exist. He thinks Lorenzo's line ended in a Queens alleyway. I'm a waitress, Amin. How does that get me close to a billionaire? You won't be a waitress tomorrow. You'll be my wife." Angela's glass hit the desk with a sharp clack. "You're insane." "It's a strategy," Amin said, his voice as cold as the Chicago wind. "Sterling will be at the Palmer House Gala next week. If I arrive with a new bride, the beautiful long-lost daughter of his dear friend Lorenzo, he won't be able to stay away. He'll want to play the benevolent uncle. He'll invite us into his home, into his confidence. And while he's busy being charmed by your voice, we will gut his empire from the inside out." "A fake marriage," Angela whispered. "A business contract," Amin corrected. "You get my protection, my wealth, and the head of the man who killed your father. When the job is done, the marriage is annulled, and you walk away with enough money to never see the inside of a diner again. It wasn't a choice, it was destiny." Angela reached out and took his hand. "I want to be the one who finishes him." "Deal?" Amin said. The following days were a whirlwind of cold legalities and ironclad secrecy. The contract was a masterpiece of clinical detachment. No intimacy, no emotional ties, total commitment to the mission. "You'll move into the estate immediately," Diana, Amin's lead counsel, instructed. "The narrative is a whirlwind romance. A chance meeting at a charity event. People will whisper, but in this city they believe whatever the man with the gun tells them to believe." The Kazemi estate was a sprawling fortress of glass and stone overlooking the black waters of Lake Michigan. Angela's new bedroom was larger than her entire apartment in Pilsen, filled with silk and marble. But the luxury felt like a cage until Amin appeared in her doorway that evening. "The gala is in 5 days, he said, rolling up his sleeves to reveal the ink and muscle of a man who had fought for everything he owned. "Sterling will be there. We make our debut, we dominate the headlines, and we wait for him to take the bait." "Can I really do this?" Angela asked, looking at her reflection. "Can I smile at him?" "You've spent years smiling at men you hated just to survive a shift," Amin said, stepping closer. "This is no different. Only this time you have the power." He reached into his pocket and produced a velvet box. Inside sat a ring that seemed to hold the light of the entire room, a massive diamond flanked by sapphires. "My grandmother's," he noted. "It's not a gift. It's armor. Every dress, every jewel, every kiss we fake in public, it's all part of the shield." He slid the ring onto her finger. It was heavy, a cold weight that anchored her to this new, dangerous world. "We have to be perfect," Amin whispered, his eyes locked onto hers. "I've been practicing for a performance my whole life," Angela replied. "I won't miss a single note." The transformation of Angela Martinez began at dawn, not with a magic wand, but with a military-grade operation. A team of specialists descended upon the Kazemi estate like a strike force. There were hairstylists who spoke in hushed Parisian tones, makeup artists who treated her face like a canvas for a masterpiece, and a personal shopper who unveiled racks of silks, velvets, and leathers that cost more than the diner Angela had scrubbed just a week prior. They stripped away 6 years of exhaustion, the callous skin of a waitress, and the slumped shoulders of the invisible. "Stop slouching," her posture coach snapped, a woman whose own spine seemed made of tempered steel. "You are no longer a ghost in a uniform. You are the wife of Amin Kazemi. When you walk, you do not ask for space, you occupy it. Angela spent hours pacing the marble halls in 4-inch heels that felt like instruments of torture. She practiced the art of the social mask, smiling with her lips while her eyes remained as cold as a winter morning on Lake Michigan. She learned to listen without reacting, to charm without revealing a single truth. From the shadows of the doorways, Amin watched her progress. His arms were often crossed, his expression a fortress of unreadable calculation. Once, after she successfully navigated a grueling session on high society etiquette, he caught her eye and gave a single sharp nod of approval. In that world, it was the equivalent of a standing ovation. The evenings, however, were for a different kind of education. In the dim light of the dining hall, Amin would spread dossiers and surveillance photos across the table. This was the war room phase of her transformation. Memorize these faces, Amin commanded, tapping a photo of a man with silver hair and a grandfatherly smile. Victor Sterling. To the world, he is Chicago's greatest saint. To us, he is the man who moves human cargo through the ports like cattle. His wife, Margot, plays the fool but never assumes she is one. He moved to the next photo, a man with a jagged scar and eyes that looked like empty sockets. Dmitry Volkov. Sterling's shadow. Former Spetsnaz. He is the one who likely pulled the trigger on your father. If you find yourself alone with him, you are already dead. Angela studied the enemies until their features were burned into her retinas. Who do I trust in your world, Amin? Only me, he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous frequency. Sterling has spent years trying to bleed his way into my organization. I don't know who is a mole and who is a brother. In this life, trust is a luxury we cannot afford. That sounds like a lonely way to live, Angela remarked, her voice soft. It is the only way to survive long enough to see justice, Amin replied. He pulled one final photo from the stack, a vibrant shot of her father, Lorenzo, mid-performance at the Lyric Opera. This is your why. Keep his face in your mind when you are laughing at Sterling's jokes. Let his memory be the anchor that keeps you from drowning in their lies. The night before the Centennial Gala, Amin arrived at her room with a large, black lacquered box. Inside lay a gown that seemed to be woven from rubies and spilled blood. It was a deep, predatory red silk that clung to the body like a second skin, elegant yet undeniably dangerous. I'll look like a target, Angela whispered, touching the fabric. You'll look like a queen, Amin corrected. A statement of power. Tomorrow you are the daughter of a legend risen from the ashes. You are untouchable because you are mine. He paused at the door, his gaze softening for a fraction of a second. Do not be afraid, Angela. Fear is Sterling's currency. Use your anger instead. Let it fuel your performance. Make him fall in love with the girl whose life he destroyed. The Palmer House Hilton was a cathedral of excess. Crystal chandeliers cast a fractured light over Chicago's elite, who moved through the ballroom like sharks in silk. When the black limousine pulled up, Angela felt the weight of her new reality. Smile, Amin whispered as the door opened to a barrage of camera flashes. You are the luckiest woman in the city. Show them. Angela stepped out, her red dress catching the light like a flickering flame. She didn't just walk, she glided, her hand resting on Amin's arm as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The whispers followed them like a wake. Is that Kazemi? Who is the girl? Is it true she's Lorenzo's daughter? The plan was working perfectly. Throughout dinner, Angela played her role with terrifying precision. She laughed at the right moments, touched Amin's hand with feigned adoration, and maintained the poised grace of a woman born to wealth. You're a natural, Amin murmured into her ear during a toast. I almost believe it myself. Don't, Angela replied, her smile never wavering. This is a performance, Amin. Nothing more. The air in the room suddenly curdled as a shadow fell across their table. Victor Sterling stood before them, looking every bit the distinguished statesman. Amin, Sterling said, his voice a practiced baritone. I heard a rumor you'd finally been tamed. I see the rumors didn't do the lady justice. Amin stood, his posture becoming a shield. Victor. Meet my wife, Angela Martinez Kazemi. Sterling's eyes, usually so controlled, flickered with a brief, jagged spark of shock before the mask was reapplied. Martinez? Not the daughter of my dear friend Lorenzo? Angela rose, extending her hand. Her father's ring felt like a brand against her skin. He was my father, she said, her voice sweet enough to hide the poison. Sterling took her hand. His skin was cold like something kept in a cellar. A tragedy, my dear. A profound loss to the world. He was a brother to me. Thank you, Angela lied, her heart hammering against her ribs. He always spoke of his friends. The conversation was a high-stakes chess match. Sterling, ever the predator, tested her, asking if she inherited her father's voice. When Amin mentioned she sang for him on the night they met, Sterling's interest sharpened into a lethal point. He invited them to an exclusive gathering at his private estate, the very inn they needed. As Sterling walked away, Angela had to clench her fists to stop the tremors. "The man who killed my father just touched me," she whispered, her voice trembling with a cocktail of rage and revulsion. "And he just invited his executioners into his home," Amin replied. But the victory was short-lived. Amin's body suddenly went rigid. "Don't look," he commanded. "The man at the bar in the brown suit. He's been tracking us. We're being targeted. We need to move. Now." They headed for the exit, but they were too late. The lights in the ballroom cut out, plunging the world into a chaotic, screaming blackness. Gunshots shattered the elegant silence, the rhythmic crack-crack-crack of semi-automatics echoing off the marble. "Stay down." Amin shouted over the din, pulling a weapon from his tuxedo. He fired back into the dark, the muzzle flashes illuminating his grim face. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed Angela, dragging her through the panicked crowd toward a service exit. They burst into the rain-slicked alleyway, running for the car as the shouts of Russian mercenaries trailed behind them. The first bullet shattered the rear window of the car. The second hit Amin just as they reached the door. He didn't scream. He simply grunted as blood began to bloom across his white dress shirt. "Get in. Drive," he roared, shoving Angela into the driver's seat. "You're bleeding," she cried, her hands slick with his blood as she gripped the steering wheel. "Drive or we both die in this alley." Angela slammed the car into gear, the tires screaming as she tore away from the Palmer house. Behind them, two black SUVs swerved into pursuit. "North," Amin gasped, clutching his side. "The safe house in Lake Forest. Don't stop for red lights. Don't stop for anything." The chase was a blur of neon and terror. Angela, the girl who had spent her life driving an old beat-up sedan, now handled a high-performance vehicle with a desperate, instinctive skill. On the highway, Amin coached her through a narrow gap created by a jackknifed truck, a maneuver that left their pursuers in a pile of twisted metal. Only one car remained. Amin, pale and sweating, rolled down the window. "When I say, brake." "Amin, you can't." "Now." She slammed the brakes. The car behind them overshot, and Amin emptied his magazine into their tires and engine block. The SUV spun out, crashing through a barrier and tumbling into the darkness. By the time they reached the cliffside safe house, Amin was slipping into shock. A man named Victor, Amin's most trusted enforcer, was waiting. They carried Amin inside, and for the next 3 hours Angela stood in the hallway, her red dress stained with the blood of the man she was supposed to be pretending to love. When Victor finally emerged, he looked exhausted. "The bullet is out. He's strong, but he needs to rest. Stay with him." Angela sat by Amin's bed as the sun began to bleed over the horizon. In sleep, his face lost its lethal edge. He looked like a man who had carried too many burdens for too long. She realized then that he had taken that bullet for her. He could have used her as a distraction, but he had shielded her instead. When he woke, his eyes found hers immediately. "You're still here?" he rasped. "You saved me," she said simply. "Business decision or not, you stayed." "Sterling knows we're a threat now," Amin said, his voice regaining its steel. "The mask is off. He'll come for us with everything he has." "Let him," Angela replied, standing tall. "I'm not the waitress he thinks I am. And I'm certainly not the victim." As she walked away to wash the blood from her skin, she knew the contract was no longer just about justice. It was about survival. And perhaps something far more dangerous than any mafia war. 3 days of seclusion at the safe house transformed their alliance. As Amin's wound began the slow process of mending, the King of Chicago was forced to rely on the woman he had intended to use as a pawn. Angela became his anchor, changing bandages and offering comfort through the feverish nights. During a rainy evening, the silence was broken by a rare moment of honesty. "Tell me about your father," Amin requested, wanting to know the man behind the legendary voice they were avenging. Angela spoke of Lorenzo Martinez, not as a celebrity, but as a devoted father who taught her to sing before she could walk. "He never drank," she whispered, the old grief surfacing. "He said it ruined the voice. But at 24, I was too buried in his debts to challenge the police's lies." In return, Amin revealed his own scar. His sister Layla. She had been a brilliant aspiring doctor before Sterling's traffickers snatched her. By the time Amin rescued her from a club, she was a hollow shell. 6 months later, she walked into Lake Michigan and never returned. Sterling sleeps peacefully while he destroys lives, Amin rasped. That ends now. Later that night, the professional facade finally fractured. Amin found Angela in the kitchen and offered her an exit. You could walk away, Angela. I can finish this alone. I am safe with you, she replied, the truth hanging heavy between them. When Amin reached out to cup her face and kissed her, the business contract vanished. It was a soft, desperate connection that complicated everything. We finished the mission, Angela decided, breathless. Then we figure out what this is. 2 weeks later, Angela stood on the deck of the SS Titan, Victor Sterling's luxury yacht. Wrapped in a silver gown and a hidden microphone, she was the bait. Amin was stationed 2 miles away on a Coast Guard cutter, waiting for her signal. The intimate gathering was a nightmare of ironies. In the opulent salon, Chicago's elite sipped champagne while 20 terrified women were being prepped for transport in the cargo hold below. Sterling introduced Angela with a smile that masked a monster. A treat beyond measure, he announced. Angela took the stage, but she didn't sing the Queen of the Night. She chose O mio babino caro, a daughter's plea to her father. She poured every ounce of her father's legacy and Amin's sister's tragedy into the notes. Her voice was a sonic blade, leaving the room in stunned silence. Even Sterling seemed moved by the mask of his own humanity. Using the distraction, Angela slipped into Sterling's private office and planted a dime-sized tracker. She was nearly caught by Dmitry Volkov, the man who had likely murdered her father. His cold threat, "It's easy to fall overboard in the dark," was interrupted by Amin's voice in her earpiece. Signal received. 60 seconds. As helicopters thundered overhead, the yacht became a battlefield. Coast Guard tactical teams swarmed the deck, arresting the guests for human trafficking. In the chaos, Amin appeared like a dark angel, cutting through Sterling's security to reach Angela. They cornered Sterling on the back deck as he attempted to flee. "I have judges and police in my pocket," Sterling sneered. "I'll be out in a week." "Not this time," Angela countered. "My father kept copies of everything. The FBI has it all." As Sterling lunged for a weapon, a single shot from Amin ended the tyrant's reign. The monster had finally fallen. The following 6 months were a blur of high-profile trials and public reckoning. With Sterling behind bars for life and his organization dismantled, the truth of Lorenzo Martinez's murder was finally vindicated. On the terrace of their estate, the morning sun sparkling off Lake Michigan, Amin sat across from Angela. The war was over, but the silence between them was filled with a new tension. "Our contract is complete," Amin noted, sliding a set of annulment papers onto the table. "You're free, Angela." Angela looked at the papers, then back at the man who had protected her. "And if I don't want to be free?" Amin didn't answer with words. Instead, he produced a new box. Inside was a sapphire the color of the deep lake, not a loner but a promise. "Then we need a new contract," he said softly. "One with no strategy. Just us. Will you marry me for real?" Tears blurred Angela's vision. "I'll probably spill something on you again," she joked through a sob. "I'm counting on it," Amin replied, sliding the ring onto her finger. He revealed he had already booked the Lyric Opera House for their wedding, the stage where her father had once reigned. He was leaving the underworld behind to go legitimate, building a life her father would have respected. They sat together in the rising light, two survivors who had turned a deadly wager into a lasting masterpiece. The waitress had found her throne, the king had found his equal, and in the heart of Chicago, they finally found their perfect harmony.